Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's IMI webinar. Hope everyone's keeping well. For some of us, it's half term, so maybe that's a day off or week off from homeschooling. For others, then it's kind of business as usual at the moment, as far as business as usual goes right now, I guess. Today's webinar is all around the impact that the new temporary regulatory framework is going to have on IMI centres. And it's a great amount of information that we're going to be going through. So just to make everyone, or put everyone at ease right now, as soon as the webinar is completed, we'll be working hard to get the recording and also a PDF version of the PowerPoint up online by close of play today is the plan. Delighted to be joined by some of the team managers from the business today. These individuals have been working very hard on all the solutions that we're going to take you through today in various levels of detail. It's got Lindsey Mitchell with us today, who's a product manager at the IMI.
Good morning, everyone.
We've also got two Adrians. We've got Adrian Stevenson, who's an external quality manager for the North. And also Adrian Marshall, who's our external quality manager for the South.
Good morning, everyone.
Looking down the list of participants, which is quite a large amount today, well over 200 already, with more coming in every minute. So I think we'll move forward with the presentation, and obviously what I need you all to do is to, those of you that haven't been on one of these webinars before, at the bottom of your screen, depending how you got your screen, there should be a Q&A function. And that enables you to ask us a question, which we'll then try our best to answer today during the webinar. If not, then we will pick that up directly with you post the event. So, agenda for today. This should take about 40-45 minutes, about half an hour going through the information, then hopefully some time at the end for some questions. So I want to talk a little bit about what's happened so far. And again, this links specifically to the framework. So since the lockdown came into force, kind of the end of March, everybody's been impacted slightly different. So we know that schools, colleges were asked to close. We also know that a number of you out there, independent training providers, have had many challenges with apprentices and learners being off work through furlough, etc. So during that time, we've been working very closely with government bodies, and we've been trying to help them support all the learners out there to make sure that where possible, they're not disadvantaged, and we can progress learners through to further education or employment. It's also meant some close collaboration across all nations in the UK, so England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, and also we've had conversations with other awarding organisations that offer similar qualifications to us. In the background, we've been extremely busy, and I know that some of you out there have had a lot of Zoom meetings or dialogue with our teams, be that the quality team or the business development teams, to try and keep everybody informed of what's happening during the current situation. All along the way, the regulators have been working through this, what they're calling an extraordinary regulatory framework, and that was published on Friday last week. So not sure if everybody's had the time to sit and read it cover to cover yet. And what we wanted to do today was just take you through what that means to IMI centres and what the next steps are going to look and feel like. The focus really on the framework is England, Northern Ireland and Wales. Scotland have a slightly different approach, but we're working very closely with the Scottish regulators. There's some guidance you'll go through today as well. Some great news at the weekend was that colleges are due to go live for face-to-face learning from June the 15th. I realise that there's a lot of challenges there. You know, we ourselves have got a situation where our facility's been closed since March. Anyone that's been to Fanshawe's before, and we're working through the process of getting people back into that facility from July is the plan. So what else has been happening? You may have seen last week that the ESFA confirmed that there'll be no funding or for English frameworks where starts occur after the 31st of July. This is a point that's been going on for a couple of years. That's been delayed as in apprenticeship standards have been implemented in England, and now that it appears that from the end of July, any apprentices in England will have to move on to standards. We deal with a number of you on English apprenticeship standards, and as if you're unaware, we're an approved EPAO for 18 routes so far. We've got dedicated teams that will support all of you during that transition. If you've not yet started that journey, please get in touch. On to the next slide. So the extraordinary framework, what does this mean? So you'll have seen quite some time ago that GCSEs and A-levels, all other general qualifications were dealt with right at the beginning, and there was a decision made to estimate or calculate their results, and this was for learners that were due to complete up to the end of July this year. There was then a long piece of work that took that through all the vocational and technical qualifications, of which obviously a lot of IMI qualifications sit in that box. It applies to all funded qualifications from entry level through to level 6, and there's 3 categories of approach for how you can take people through to completion of the qualification. I just want to make a real valid point here. There are a number of you out there that are managing to still function and operate and still engage with learners delivering training, but we also have a number of IMI centres that deliver some of the qualifications face-to-face and have been able to continue to do so, ensuring they're COVID secure and making sure they've got all the relevant PPE in place. So whilst this framework is here to support an awful lot of learners, tens and tens of thousands of learners in our sector between now and the end of July, if you're able and in a position to operate and to bring learners in, you know, car dealerships open up again from 1st of June next week. And as I said before, college is expected to be opening for face-to-face interventions from middle of June. You know, we could have a situation where people are delivering some of these qualifications face-to-face in a COVID secure environment, which is absolutely fine and allowed. There's no problem with that. If you're unable to do that, however, then it falls into the 3 categories. The first category being calculated grade, and the team that are on the panellists that are on this call will talk in a bit more detail around this shortly, but fundamentally calculated grade aimed at those qualifications that are to be used in progression into higher education, such as GCSEs and A-levels. Functional skills also fit into this category, and there are half a dozen of our qualifications that also fit in this category. Adapting assessment, that means that the qualification could be there for mixed use, so it could be around employment, could be around HE or further education, progression, and if that's unable to be applied, so if we can't adapt assessment, then the final bit comes into delay or reschedule. We do have qualifications that sit in this category, and the primary use is where it's a qualification around license to practice or access to a professional, a profession, or confirming occupational competency. The full list of IMI qualifications and which category they fit in is on our website, and there is a link at the back of this PowerPoint pack which will take you there. Majority of our qualifications do sit in adapt and delay, and again we'll talk in a little bit more detail of what that means to you. And as I mentioned with delay, you know, that's delaying until it's safe to deliver face-to-face, and we do know that people are already at that position or they're working hard to get to that position in June. Main exception in Calculate, which Lindsey's going to take us through now, and that sits around technical awards, and Lindsey's going to talk to you now about the Calculate solution. Thanks, Lindsey. Oh, sorry, I got that wrong. I do apologise. The timeline. So over the next 2 months, this is what it's going to look and feel like for us. So just before we do move on to Lindsey, last Friday, the regulatory framework was released by Ofqual. We put a centre communication out as well, which took people a link to there. But I know, looking on social media, a lot of you that are on the call have seen this before. Today, the webinar. So this is our first chance to tell a lot of people how this impacts IMI centres. As I discussed earlier, for those that have joined past the introduction, this webinar and the PowerPoint pack will be on our website today. From Friday this week, we'll be providing more guidance to centres around how you can calculate results and also how you can apply for adaptation processes on those qualifications where adaptation is the category it's been placed in. From the 1st of June, so next week, the submission window will open for centres to propose their adaptations. So, you know, do you want to look for online tests that you can do remotely, for example? And again, Adrian will talk through that detail shortly. We then have 2 parallel pieces of work from the next week. So from the 1st of June to the 26th of June, the submission window will be open for those centres that deliver the technical awards, which sit in the calculate box. From the 1st of June to the end of July, then the quality assurance team will be working very closely with you all to make sure that adaptations are in place, the support is there up to the end of July when this framework comes to an end. So we've got a team of external quality assurers that are sat there waiting. They're obviously doing some bits and bobs, but they're there to support you over the next 2 months. So you're not in this on your own. It is truly a partnership between the IMI and our centres. Okay, so I think I've got this timing right now. So we're going to move on to Lindsey, who can talk about the calculation for us.
Thank you, Mark, and morning. So just to clarify and to sort of answer a few questions I've already seen coming up on the chat and previous to the webinar, to calculate a qualification means that no further assessments are to take place and a final grade is estimated by the centre based on the likelihood or the likely grade that their learners would have achieved had they had the opportunity to take any assessments. Now, just to recap what Mark said, on the 3 categories, we had to, as an awarding organisation, advise Ofqual the qualifications that we felt sat in each category. And Ofqual did reply to all AOs and actually altered some of the categories that we had placed our qualifications into. One of these alterations were our Key Stage 4 qualifications. And the alteration was that it was placed into the calculate category as opposed to adapt. The reason behind that, and the reason that they call these qualifications a category 1 qualification, is that its primary purpose is for progression into either FE or HE. And then that's what puts it into the same bracket as GCSEs, A-levels and functional skills, which is why they are also being able to be calculated as opposed to adapt as their preferred method. So I won't read the qualifications out, as you can see them on the screen, but it does cover only the qualifications limited to this slide. So only the Key Stage 4 qualifications that we offer fall into the calculate, which means no more evidence is required to be collected and you can estimate, if you like, your learner's final grade. Obviously, there'll be instances where you won't be able to gain further evidence, and we don't want you to panic about that. I'm going to go through the types of additional evidence you can provide for your learners and for our external quality team to review. But also, at the end of the day, there are circumstances where you won't be able to gain this evidence, and there may be circumstances where you need to either adapt or even delay, but it depends entirely on your own personal circumstances as a training centre. But as a preferred method of mitigation, Ofqual wish for us to have our Key Stage 4 as a calculate qualification. Thank you. Okay, so again, lots of information on these slides. You will get them at the end, so you don't need to note these down at the moment. As I've mentioned, it's a category 1 qualifications that we're going to calculate. What we've done, and I'll show you an image on the next screen when we get to that bit, is for the Key Stage 4 qualifications, we've adapted the process in which you claim for your qualifications. So there are going to be many instances where we have some learners who have completed all of their online assessments and it's just the project grade that needs entering or some practicals that need completing. Or we may have an instance where you have learners that have missing online assessments. So we've adapted the tool that we're going to use, and again I'll show you shortly, to cover all of your learners, and it will enable you to place in actual grades achieved and your predicted grades for those learners. What this will mean though for you as a centre is that no claims will be made until all evidence to support your predictions has been reviewed by the external quality team. And as you saw from the timeline that Mark talked you through, we're going to take July to do our quality assurance processes and then issue the results to you and your learners post July. We will have a definitive date for you within June, but at the moment it's August. So calculation will use evidence that you've already collected to help you provide a rationale to us that you believe the learner would have passed. So the types of evidence that we'll expect or ask from you will be anything that you've got that proves topics that have been covered in teaching, so schemes of work where you've gotten to with that, any formative assessments you've carried out, whether they're the optional written tests or you have your own centre devised. We may ask to look at attendance records for learners, so we could use that data alongside the historical data of grades that your centres typically achieve for these qualifications to agree the final grade for the learner. We're aware that these learners are unlikely to be re-engaged with yourselves and unlikely to be able to come back and complete assessments. So I believe, and that's the rationale behind it, this is why this is calculate. So with the best of your knowledge, because you know your learners, we need you to send in the grading sheets when the window opens in June with any actual grades and a combination of those and your predicted grades along with the evidence that we ask for you from you in the guidance that we're going to give. The bit in blue is something that we have to set out as a minimum evidential requirement, if you like. So there will be a point or a cut-off point where we will not be able to agree or predict with you that a learner may have passed. So we have to give certain types of evidence, a hierarchy of trust, if you like. Anything that's already banked, so for instance online test results, if you've got evidence that sits within e-portfolio, will carry a higher level of weighting, if you like, or trust. If you don't use an e-portfolio, it doesn't mean you're disadvantaged, because you will have those assessments banked somewhere. You'll have them in a portfolio or you'll have them electronically saved, and you will have tracking documents, we hope, to show the progress of your learners to the point where they were unable to attend. Those types of evidence carry the most weight, as I've mentioned, but we will take into account all other types of evidence that I've already mentioned. So likely performance, tracking documents, practice attempts, delivery, teaching methods, you know, any levels of attainment they may have already achieved from a previous qualification can all be used to estimate this final grade. What I'd like to do now is to show you a screenshot of the adapted grading sheet, please, which is on the next slide. Thank you. So this grading sheet will have, well, it will look familiar to you, hopefully. What we're going to do is we're going to have a few tabs on this sheet. The first one will be for information. The second tab will be the grading sheet as you're used to using it. So you'll be able to complete this in the same way you would should you have learners that have got all of the external assessments and you just want to calculate their grade. The third tab will look like this, and it will, instead of asking you to put online test percentages in, for example, or grade percentages, you'll use drop downs to either select the grade they have achieved or select a predicted grade, which you can see is highlighted in yellow. And this sheet will not give you a calculation for a final grade. It will return the message that it's subject to quality assurance, which means that your EQA will review your evidence against that prediction and then award the grade for you for your learner. There'll be some guidance coming out, as I've mentioned, by the end of this week. So if you have any further questions, obviously speak to your external quality, and I will pass on to Adrian. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, so as Mark mentioned previously, agreed adaptations and delay is the biggest area of where IMI qualifications sit. So for this slide, I've split it down into BRQs and VCQs. So the first point you'll notice relates to changing the invigilation requirement. So we have created an IMI remote online invigilation process. Within this process, it details how a step-by-step approach of how you can move forward as a centre, but also we have developed learning resources so you can cascade that information in the form of PowerPoints to your staff and vigilators. So that sits across both BRQ and the VCQ. If that still becomes a challenge within the BRQs, we are allowing utilisation of IMI written assignments to meet knowledge requirements. This means that the candidate can submit the written knowledge assignment, which is attached to the unit. By doing this, it will provide the relevant knowledge to bypass the online assessment. But please be mindful, there needs to be relevant knowledge within these assignments and showing a clear understanding of that learner's understanding of that unit. Adapting assessment methods. Okay, so in relation to BRQs, it may be that the skills task, you've witnessed the candidate carrying out the skills task, but he hasn't had a chance to complete the paperwork. So from that point of view, we could use professional discussion. That can be recorded on the assessment paperwork for both the assessor to complete and to show that the professional discussion has been completed. The next step we can use to supplementary evidence to the BRQ is utilising the diverse evidence and assessment observations, which can be mapped over from the VCQs and provide the knowledge and skills that have been achieved within that BRQ. There may also be the option of previously practiced skills and knowledge assessments. There may be areas where, as centres, you've witnessed a learner carrying out a practical skills task, but you haven't had a chance to carry out the individual skill with that learner. So please utilise this information as evidence as well. Also, we've got the prior learning, which they may have captured previously with other qualifications and other tasks they've completed throughout their learning. So moving on to the VCQs. Like I said previously, we have the online invigilation process now. So please contact your EQA. I'll explain the whole process to you and support you through the application of that. Observed assessments can be remote rather than face-to-face. It's always been in the strategies, but it's been very few times it's been taken up by the centres. So yet again, please speak to your EQA and provide your guidance with the process, and also we can move on to simulation in line with the qualification criteria. Obviously, this doesn't mean you can simulate everything, but where the criteria states, you can use simulation to cover that relevant piece of evidence or observation. If you're struggling on the knowledge side aspect, so if somebody's just moving through a VCQ on their own, please utilise previously completed knowledge assessments. So anything that's documented, this can be supplied as supplementary evidence to meet these requirements. And as mentioned in the BRQ, use previously recognised prior learning. So note, when adaptation is not possible, you'll need to move the learner to delay. Okay, if that's okay. So if you need any further information on that, speak to your EQA. Okay, Georgia, thank you. So moving on to delay and reschedule. Within this section, majority relates to the VCQs, SVQs, and specific BRQs. So that's areas of licence to practice and obviously occupation competence. The licence to practice relates mainly to the F-gas in our sector, but we are aware now that centres, as Mark previously said, are out and about and are conducting assessments live. So some of the areas where delays occurred relates to learners not being in the place of work, being furloughed, also training providers are in the same boat with that, and I hope to gather the evidence of that progression. So if I'm able to complete, I suggest that delaying the learning, make sure you have a break in the learning for that, so it helps with your completion rates. Also, what I would suggest you do going forward is you look at your planning in relation to next year. So obviously with social distancing, how you intend to deliver qualifications next year, and also obviously the VRQs around planning those practical assessments, classroom sizes, and anything that will influence on the delivery to yourself. As previously mentioned, the EQAs will be there to support you through the whole process. So regarding the adapt and the delay, and as previously stated, they will be in touch to discuss further. Thank you, Georgia.
Good morning, everyone. In preparation for the release of this extraordinary framework, we've been doing a lot of work in the background and looking at the data around the qualifications that are classed as in scope. So I wanted to identify the centres that could be potentially affected. These are the figures you're seeing on the screen at the moment, with 423. So we initially started off by contacting centres with a Google Doc to collect some basic information to give us an idea. We then obviously upgraded that to a spreadsheet or a survey, if you will, just kind of collating information on how people saw it, the numbers, and what was actually being affected. Now that the initial data received, you can see it was just 109. So less than 20%. It's not really helped us there, really. But what we plan to do now is, obviously with this data, we've highlighted the centres that have, and obviously we can highlight the centres that haven't. So with this information now, we're going to review it against, or we have reviewed it, sorry, against the 3 areas. Obviously, the estimate, the adapt, and the delay. But we've got the EQAs that have freed their calendars up. So with this information now, they're going to identify the centres that haven't corresponded or corresponded yet, to find out more information, so we can see put this into our spreadsheets and figures, so we can see the numbers that are coming through. Just so the guys, just so the EQAs can focus on supporting all the centres and contacting the shortfall, which is so important, so everyone gets supported in the right way. Okay, George, can we move on? So how are we going to do this? Our proposed solution for learners that should complete by the 31st of July is a new template. So this template's been put together. It will have guidance on it and information for the flexibilities that we're proposing. We'll require this to be completed by the centres. So we'll be sending it out this week. We want the centres to complete it, put their adaptations in, or how they believe they'll be able to collect the evidence. And as Lindsey mentioned earlier, proposed adaptations. We'll then get this sent back to us via the IMI Centres Hub on an inquiry form. This will help us with our audit trail, because obviously we are checked and regulated as well, so we'll be checking that way. When it comes to us, this will be handled by then an EQA. We'll look over the information, look at your proposed adaptations, and kind of confirm them on the sheet that we'll then sent back to you of agreement or suggestions of other areas that might need to be taken into consideration. From that, then, we'd expect you to work, to complete all this activity. And as it says on there, certification claims won't be made until an EQA approval has been granted. So you will have to get the details back from us as you continue in the background to make it happen. Obviously, we need all the quality assurance records to be kept up to date. So we're expecting IQA records and sampling or moderation, or whatever you refer to it as, that's obviously kept up to date. Because we will be checking that and obviously making sure that it's maintained, ready for when we audit it as well. Now, put on there as the last point, failure to follow this guidance prior to any certification, it may be viewed and potentially viewed as maladministration or malpractice. But we've got to be quite strong on this one. We've got to make sure that things are being done correctly, information is being supplied, and we won't be hanging around. We'll be getting it to you as soon as we can. We're looking for a quick turnaround in all areas. And like I say, we've cleared people's calendars for the next 2 months to make sure this can happen. So the forms are ready, they'll be coming out to you, and the staff's ready, not just the EQA department, but the CAST team as well. And we're expecting to to help you and support you and make sure it's as smooth as it possibly can be. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. We've had quite a few questions come in, so thank you to the attendees for doing that. And what we'll do now is just spend the rest of this session trying to look through some of those questions and provide answers where we can. As I said at the beginning, if we can't provide answers today, then we will pick that up directly with the individuals that have asked them through the teams that are here to support you. So there's been a couple of comments around I think possibly from a couple of people that came in after the introduction around, will the slides be available at the end of the presentation? And the answer is yes. So the information and the recording will be on the website, on the webinar page where you went to register for the webinar. So that will be hopefully with you by the end of the day for everybody to review again or share with colleagues that were unable to attend the session today. There's also a fair amount of questions around colleges and opening. So the government announced that from June the 15th, they're expecting face-to-face interactions to continue, to restart in colleges, but fully aware and looking at the comments that that's going to be a challenge for some people, either due to scheduling and bringing lower volumes of learners in on a rota basis, and obviously all of the COVID secure elements to introduce as well. So realise that none of this is perfect, and also some of it may be challenging for certain individuals, particularly around transport and other things. Obviously for those learners that sit in the calculate box, that's something that can be done without seeing the learners again and going through their information that you've already got access to, and also some of the adaptations that Adrian Stevenson took you through earlier are able to be done remotely. So possible to continue through the assessments without having to physically sit face to face with those individuals. So I think it's definitely going to be a bit around scheduling, planning and prioritising for those activities that can be done remotely, also for the calculation that can be done for the relevant qualifications that Lindsey took you through earlier. There's a question from Stephen, and I think probably Adrian Stevenson, if you could answer this for me, and it's around written knowledge assessments being used instead of online testing. If you can just answer that for us, please, Adrian. If you can turn your microphone on, please. Thank you.
So yes, we are going to utilise the written assessments instead of the to meet the requirements of the online assessments. It will be a manual process we have to put in place at Fanshaw's, but within those written assessments, we are expecting that the candidate or learner, whichever term you use, is showing that they shown a full understanding of what that unit outcome should be, and that knowledge of that knowledge assessment and all the skill that goes with that as well. So it will need to be pretty in depth, and that will be audited obviously through yourselves as IQAs, and also through the EQAs as well, to make sure that it meets those requirements.
Thanks, Adrian. Lindsey, we've got a question around predicted grades, and somebody interested in how much of the level 1 certificate needs to be completed in order to predict those grades. I wonder if you could add any more information on that, please.
Yeah, you can predict grades for anything that you believe they would have achieved. So it's difficult for me to give a percentage because I don't want to unduly disadvantage any learners that haven't taken any online assessments yet. If you can show evidence that that learner would likely have achieved a pass, a merit or a distinction through written assessments, formative, through practice, practical assessments, etc., then they won't have had to have banked any external assessments at all, technically. But as I mentioned before, the external assessments do carry more weight, as do your internally assessed projects, etc. So if everything is based purely on a prediction of pass, but there's no evidence to support that for a vast majority of the qualification, it may be unlikely that we would agree. So as long as you can provide supporting evidence, then technically there isn't a percentage. We've left on minimum threshold of evidence as the types of evidence that we ask you to provide, as opposed to the quantity, or the quantity of the qualification that's been completed so far. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Lindsay. You know, we've got a number of questions, and I'll try and pull these into a cohort of questions, really. So we've got questions coming in, or statements, information coming in from centres that have still got staff furloughed. Appreciate and really empathise how difficult that is, and also around any learners that may be shielding or unable to come in. And I just want to recover from what I said earlier on. You know, this framework isn't a awarding body framework, it's a regulatory framework from the regulators. It's a set of guidance to try and deal with most learners as possible during the next couple of months. I think from looking at the information, it's clear that not every single learner that was due to achieve from now till the end of July this year, it may be possible to do all of the relevant information, relevant assessments, etc. Somebody asking whether this will be extended, the framework. Certainly there's been nothing formally announced yet, although it's certainly been intimated that this could flow into the autumn if there's a situation where there are learners that may seem to be being disadvantaged due to all of the factors that I've just discussed. So, you know, I think we'll need to keep our eye with the regulators on that one as we get into the data collection with you all in the coming weeks. Then that will become a lot clearer, and we'll be able to feed back to the regulators, explaining the situation and where we may need to look for extensions on some of these adaptations or calculations, etc. I think calculations should be hopefully okay, as long as you've got obviously staff available. But the adaptations are likely to be the more challenged if staff or learners are not available for many of the reasons that you're all sending through to us. You know, so we've got to look at that, and I'm sure that you've all been doing a lot of planning, looking at your learners, looking at your learners' current status with regards to, are they in work, are they not in work, if they're an apprentice or a work-based learner, if they're full-time learners, what does the schedule look like for bringing them back in? We've also got other challenges. You know, I'm not sitting here saying this is all going to be really straightforward and easy. In the midst of all this, we've got devolved nations that are applying different measures to try and maintain social distancing, people travelling for work, etc. So there's certainly going to be a number of other factors that are going to influence us over the coming weeks. Hopefully Adrian's question around use of written assignments allays some of the questions people are putting in, where they've got either high volumes of learners that need to do online tests, or there's possible challenges around connectivity with equipment, etc. You know, so if you're able to get written assignments done in lieu of online tests, then as Adrian said, that's an area that we can support with. Just going to look through some more of the questions on here. There's an awful lot coming in, so I'm, you know, are we going to get all of these questions done during this webinar? Possibly not, but I think I've grouped a number of them together, getting some good feedback here that people are glad that they can use knowledge-based assessments, etc. Somebody's asked again about where they can find which qualifications falls into which category. As was discussed earlier, it's there's a spreadsheet on our website which contains all of the IMI qualifications in scope, and again, they're qualifications that are in scope. So these are ones where the regulator have looked at learners with achievement dates up to the end of July and then applied the relevant category to them. So that spreadsheet is on the IMI website. There's a link on the next slide, on this slide pack, which will take you to the page where the spreadsheet can be found. If you're struggling for any reason, just get straight in touch with us and we can get that to you straight away. I think what we'll actually probably do is send that out this week with the other guidance and information as we discussed earlier. So we've got another element here around if we're extending large numbers of learners into autumn, you know, that there's obviously going to be an impact on new starts as well. I think, Adrian, you discussed this a little bit earlier around being really mindful of scheduling. I think even with new starts on a clean slate, that's likely to give some facilities some new ways of working, maybe smaller class sizes, maybe having less people in the workshop at any one time. You know, again, it's I think next year from September onwards is going to be just as heavy in planning and getting the information in place for your new starts coming in as it will for achieving people through to the end of July, which I think is probably why, you know, it's key for us all to work together over the next 6 to 8 weeks to complete and achieve as many valid qualifications as we can, so it removes any of that kind of bottleneck or heavy workload as we roll into September. Let me just have a look on here. So there's Adrian Stevenson, if you can just talk a little bit around what we're doing with Scotland in particular, because there's a number of people asking questions around Scotland, if that's okay.
Yes, of course, Mark. Yes, we'll have a meeting tomorrow with SQA Accreditation to move forward how we intend to support the Scottish network of centres. So we will be covering the same information with them tomorrow as well. So hopefully we can come to some solution and move forward in Scotland as well. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Adrian. I think that just kind of emphasises, as I said earlier, we're dealing with a number of other political, governmental challenges where we're going across nations. But thank you for that. I know that Adrian and the team are heavily involved with the Scottish regulator to support our centres that deliver qualifications to Scottish learners. Lindsey, I have a question for yourself around Key Stage 4 qualifications and some that may have a suffix at the end around the coding. I just wondered if there was any information we could give our attendee on that.
So the suffix meaning is in the root in brackets or the year, say 16 example. It's the qualifications that I've listed, it's those titles. So although there may be a different year variation or you may have a different root in brackets, it is that main title. So yes, they're all covered under that. So it doesn't matter which route or which year you've registered for. I hope that's what you meant.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsey. That's great. I think it was just to clarify for, obviously we showed certain codes and there may be other codes on qualifications. Adrian, Marshall, if you can. We've got a question come in from Toby around evidence of task completed in level 1 light vehicle to evidence competency of practical tasks on the level 2 light vehicle. Just wondered if you could give any guidance for Toby on that.
So I've not seen the question, and this is what using level 1 task in level 2.
Yeah, so if I've got evidence of a task completed in level 1, you know, can that be used to evidence competency of practical tasks on level 2?
Well, difficult. I'd have to see. We'd have to look at what the actual task was being used, see the complexity of the task that was obviously finished at level 1. But obviously, a lot of the aspects carried out would more likely map across. I think this could be added to with some additional questioning to confirm competency, to upgrade it or upskill it, I suppose, to the next level. So recording that on the task sheet that's already been completed with confirmation, I think would definitely support.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks. And I think, some of the detail, it's clear on the questions, we've discussed a couple of times, it's a lot of detail where the EQA, the relevant EQA, will be able to deal directly with you. And as I discussed, we will pick these questions straight up, and the EQAs will be going through these questions this afternoon. So we've kind of got over nearly 100 questions online now, 99. So we'll see if somebody wants to be the 100th question coming through. There we go, 100 now. So, every question will be picked up by a member of the team, and they will get in touch with you directly. Just on that point, though, we don't have names for every attendee. So if you have posted questions, but your name isn't currently visible, if you could please get in touch with Georgia and let her know your best contact details, that would be excellent. And then we can make sure we address your specific queries. We've got a question here around people that are coming through to achieve. So these are about apprentices coming through to complete a framework this year, and getting specifically through a level 2 framework. And as I discussed at the beginning, the government have now confirmed that frameworks will close for registrations in England from the 1st of, or learners starting from the 1st of August. Obviously, if there's a level 2 achiever due to achieve and sits in this current cohort, if they achieve and complete before the end of July, then if your progression route is onto a level 3 framework, then you'll be able to do that. If they don't achieve before the end of July, however, then that does kind of restrict their progression slightly. In most cases, and obviously not in all, but in most cases, there is an apprenticeship standard at level 3 that you could take a level 2 framework achiever onto. Now that doesn't mean suddenly going into a whole another 2 or 3 years worth of learning on a standard. Prior learning will be accounted for from what they've already done on their level 2 framework, and a reduced duration on a standard with endpoint assessment would be the best solution for those people. Again, not always possible if there isn't a standard in place. So again, if that's the case, and you've got a specific standard, a specific group of cohort of learners where there isn't a standard in place, that could be a real challenge. So, we're happy to work with you on possible solutions, but we'd need to know the full detail of that. If that's somebody like yourselves that's in that position. So just going through some more of the questions. Michael's got a question. Adrian, Stevenson, if you could answer this for us. So Michael's got a question around professional discussions and whether they would need to be recorded as evidence.
Professional technology is great, and yes, you can record the professional discussion, but if you also want to document that as well, that's entirely up to yourself. But as long as we've got a clear audit of that discussion, that would suffice to meet that requirement.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Adrian. Again, I think this is some of the detail that will definitely come out with conversations with the EQA that are going to be happening over the coming weeks. Got a question from somebody asking if the whole recording will be available and not just the slides. Yes, this whole recording will be on our website, accompanied with a PDF version of the slides. I'm just looking through to see if there's any others that we can cover off whilst we're on the call today. Okay, so this one again is probably for yourself, Adrian. Stevenson, obviously, as a lot of these fit within adaptation, and we've got a few people asking around the details around the new remote online testing, vigilation and process.
Right, okay. Okay, so the new online testers vigilation process has been put together on the basis of using video conferencing platforms. So whether it's Zoom or teams that can be utilised to carry out the invigilation of the online assessment. They're on a one-to-one basis, the online assessment will be, and also part of that will be for you to provide us information of when those online assessments are going to be conducted, and also it can also form part of the audit from our perspective as well, to make sure those online assessments are being conducted correctly as well. As previously mentioned, we've created PowerPoints for both systems, not all in out other video platforms, which you can use to record the invigilation of that assessment as well. So that will be there for auditing purposes from an IMI perspective as well. So there's, like I said earlier, there's quite a few things we've put in place to support you, which your EQL fully explain and provide you with all the relevant information and documents to support you through that process. Thanks, Mark.
That's great, Adrian. Thank you. We've got a few people asking if all of the questions will be available at the end as well. So, yeah, what we'll try to do is pull all of that into one place. We've got over 120 questions now, so it could be slightly a big document and probably take longer than today to sort that out. But we will. We're conscious and really, really conscious. This is a very, very, very big concern at the moment about how we get all these students through to completion. Believe me, we are here to support you and work with you on that. Looking at the information coming through, there's a number of things in here that will be covered already, but there's some things that will come to you directly for. But as some people have asked, we will try and get all of the questions into one format that we can share with the attendees. I've got a question here around somebody asking, if a centre does reopen, can we carry on with the standard online assessment and practical workshop assessments? And the answer is yes. This is a temporary framework where it's where people are unable to deliver as they normally would. So as long as you're COVID secure and you can schedule it in and you've got all the relevant PPE and everything else in place, then of course you can continue to take people through. And we've got centres, there are some of you on this call today that are already doing this, that they're still working and assessing people, albeit in full PPE and in a social distancing way. Okay, we're coming towards the end now, everybody, of today's session. Just going to share the slide, which has got a number of web links on it for you all. So these web links will take you to a couple of places. Obviously the IMI COVID page, which is updated daily with an awful lot of information on there for centres, members and learners. The government's coronavirus information page, where you can go and make sure you've got everything you need to ensure people are safe and to ensure that facilities are COVID secure where it's relevant and possible. There's a slide there around a link on vocational technical qualifications in scope. This will take you to our website where we have got the full list of the in-scope qualifications and which category they sit in. And then also the final slide is a technical centre update, technical qualifications centre update, which went out last Friday. So if you haven't seen that, you've got a link to that there as well. I just want to thank you all for everybody that's been on the webinar today, and thank you to the panellists. This doesn't stop today. The IMI team will be in contact with you this week with regards to how we get through calculated and adapted assessments, and we'll be with you through, not just through the next couple of months, but beyond, as we all continue to work in a new way, given the situation that we're all in from COVID. But thank you all, stay safe, and we'll see you again on another webinar soon. Take care.